What's going on, Barflies and Bears fans and draft fans all alike? Last weekend, we saw the NFL Draft Combine going on in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Field, and we saw Danny. We got a bunch of athletes in this daggone draft. We talked last
Woo!
last time about improving our team defense on speed. I think we got it in spades in this draft. What do you think, Danny?
Speed was the name of the game at this combine. I think I saw NFL Network's coverage, and then they ran a thing where, in terms of average speed per position group, this year's crop was the best, except for every position except for quarterbacks. And I think
Right.
that was one where just two quarterbacks ran, so that kind of skewed the numbers there a little bit. But yeah, I mean the Bears are looking, like I said, I've said multiple times, the Bears are looking for team speed. The Bears are looking for defensive tackle, defensive ends, up-ball linebackers, safeties. I think that this draft falls right in line for the Bears' needs in terms of all those position groups and adding speed on top of it as well. So a lot of guys improve themselves in terms of just popped during the weekend. If their name wasn't on top of a lot of scouts or teams' minds, that definitely kind of rekindled some of that. And a lot of teams now are going to go back and kind of look at some of that tape. I've been going back and looking at some of these players that I hadn't seen yet, but some of their measurables and some of their athletic abilities, what they just demonstrated at Indy, caught my eye. And I'm going to go back and watch some of these players as well. Some defensive ends that I'm going to go back and look at. The safety group is by far one of the more athletic groups that I can recall coming out in terms of the safeties.
Yeah.
Corners, obviously, and then receivers. Obviously, I keep saying the Bears are looking for a dynamic speed threat at receiver, and they don't care if it's small, tall, slot, outside. Ben Johnson wants a dynamic threat that could threaten the field vertically, and I think this group could potentially give him someone as late as or early as day 3, right? Same thing with the backfield in terms of running backs. You want a dynamic speed option out of the backfield to complement Swift and Monangai, and this will give him some options there. And again, nothing. I'm talking about day 1 or day 2. I'm talking about possibly like day 3 here. That's how deep this class is in terms of those skill positions there. So, yeah, it was exciting, especially if you're looking, harnessing defense and harnessing speed and some of the positions that the Bears are looking at. And I'll tell you, a lot of winners coming out of this combine. A lot of guys also didn't participate. What kind of?
Yeah.
I understand why some of these players don't want to go through the whole gamut of running through the combine hoops and drills. But if you're going to run the field drills, run the 40.
Right.
If you're going to run the 40, do the field drills. The one thing I've always been told by scouts is, like, they always say, like, listen, if you bomb your 40 at the combine, that's fine. You have your pro day, right?
Absolutely.
If you don't run the 40 at the combine and now you bomb at your pro day, that's going to hurt you more, right? So it's like if you're not going to do anything at all, don't do anything else. Like Mendoza, he didn't do anything at all. All right, he just was there to interview, and kind of like Caleb, a couple years ago, meet the teams, do the physicals, talk up and all that stuff, but not do anything. But then to do like the drill, the field work, and not to the 40, it turned a lot of scouts off. That's what I've been told.
Yeah. Well, how much of it, because a lot of the coaches aren't staying, like Ben Johnson went down for like the first day, did some interviews with ESPN 1000 and kind of dipped out. He was at the Bulls game during the O-line workout, so he wasn't really – I mean, obviously he's got his scouts doing all that kind of work, but the biggest thing I think for the higher-ups in the organization is to get the one-on-ones, to interview these prospects. Is that kind of correct, or –
Sean McVay started something a couple of years. Sean McVay and the Rams started something a couple of years ago, where McVay and his staff rarely come down to Indy in a combine. So what they do is, obviously everything's videotaped. Okay,
right?
All the workouts are videotaped. All the measurables, everything's videotaped. All recorded. And then for the one-on-ones in terms of the interviews, with technology nowadays, Ben Johnson and McVay, some of the other, Kyle Shanahan, they zoom in. So if they bring in said prospect for a 20-minute interview, Ben Johnson's there via Zoom, listening in, asking questions and all that stuff. So it's not like he's not participating. He just feels like he does more work being back at his office, because, the tape is fed into him directly there. He can break it down there in its comfort of his own office. again, this grind for coaches throughout the season, it's a grind, and they're away from family and all that stuff. He's got young kids. He wants to spend some time with them and still do his work as well. So it's not like Ben Johnson was just blowing off the combine. He was working. He was watching he was getting the feeds of the workouts directly sent to him. And also during the interview process, he was there via Zoom, talking to the prospect as well. So it wasn't working. He just wasn't there physically.
Yeah. And he's got his medical staff there to give us any red flags on any of that as well. Right. Some of the things that came out, Ruben Bain was a great pass rusher all year. His arms measured minus or less than 31 inches. Like
30.
That. What are your thoughts on that? Because the tape shows you he's a hell of a pass rusher. Right, but the measurement.
Ruben Bain to me was always going to be a tough scout, right? Because I'm of the belief, old school scouting stuff where length and edge rushers is you need them. 33 right. plus inch arm length is always a plus. Have we seen players that have sub 33 succeed? Yes, but those are the anomalies. They're not the norm, right? And Ruben Bain was always going to be a tough, a tough scout for me, a process to look at if you're a team, right? Because obviously the tape shows top 10, top 15 player,
right?
Productivity, the way he beats the offensive lineman, his ability to dip his shoulder, get underneath the pad level of a tackle, get around him, and he plays with such physicality. He's got a powerful base, a thick frame throughout. So I think that's what his game is, more power. But 30 and 7/8 is his arm length, came in at 6'2", 263. So definitely, subpar in terms of the measurables. But it's a team's going to have to, be able to take a chance on him. A team for me that could use a hybrid or utilize as a hybrid, defense. Where you have some 4-3, some 3-4, and where a player like Bain could probably succeed in. The one thing you got to do is with these players that don't fit the prototype is you got to find. And what position do we do, or what position do we put them in so they can do what they do, right? And that's be successful. So that's where whatever team drafts them, whether it's the Titans at number 4 or the Cardinals at 3 or another team, later on in the draft, how do we get the best of Ruben Bain? Let him do what he does best, is just go after the quarterback and try and make things as easy for him as possible. So, lining him up one-on-one at defensive tackle, I think is not something that he's going to be able to do in the NFL. At least early on, right?
Right.
Learn, get coached up, play the leverage game. He's got, in terms of, he's shorter, he's powerful, so he can always out leverage guys, bigger, taller, more athletic guys. And I've seen him multiple times. He plants his hands in the chest of the offensive lineman and just walks him back into the lap of the quarterback.
Right.
You can't teach that, right? That's just brute strength. And he's, like I said, he's got that lower, powerful lower half. That's where he's going to have to win. He's going to have to win with some power. He's not going to be able to, necessarily beat him with the way some of the other guys do. The guys have the longer arms, the height and all that stuff.
So if he were to hypothetically fall to 25,
he's not.
Would you be okay with? I know it's not going to happen because the tape's showing you different. But would it be fine if the Bears drafted him? You think they'd be able to work with him?
You take the player based off his production, right? And then the way he plays. Now, Dennis Allen's going to have to kind of come up with a way and say, all right, if that scenario just played out happened, Dennis Allen's going to have to come up and say, all right, how am I going to utilize this guy, right? Dennis Allen has a prototype. He wants those big, tall, lanky, physical defensive ends, defensive tackles as well. We'll get into some of that here today with the tackles, but Bain will give you that physicality. But how is Allen going to go ahead and again utilize him to where he can succeed at the next level, right? Because there's going to be some areas where he's not going to be able to get off of blocks because of the short arms. He doesn't have that elite first step quickness, the bend that some of the elite pass rushers have, right? The Michael Parsons and so on and so forth. So, but he does a lot in terms of leverage at Miami. He does a lot in terms of power at Miami, speed to power conversion, which is basically bull rushing the tackle back into the quarterback. Can you do that here at the next level? And that's something that Dennis Allen, if that scenario presented himself, would have to kind of say, all right, this is how I'm going to utilize him. Me personally, I don't know if he would do that because I have never seen Dennis Allen throughout his career utilize a player with those type of dimensions. But he's also never presented that scenario either. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the same goes for Cassius Howell. His arm length was short as well.
Yeah.
He
See
was
that Howell,
13
that's the
and
thing with Howell is like both Howell and Bain were so successful, and Howell was different, right? Howell was more of that athletic, twitchy, the guy with the great ankle flexion, the guy that can flatten that corner, get around, and then just flatten get to the quarterback.
right.
But see, for me, Howell is he's got a position. He's a 3-4 outside linebacker. And
Yeah,
that's where
yeah,
I see him at, right? Bain, there's talk about maybe him in a 3-4 position, kind of like a Khalil Mack, or do you kick him inside to a 3 technique, which I personally don't like, but I can see why they're kind of bringing that idea up. But again, you have to have a plan for a player like Bain with those dimensions and be able to utilize them. So, but Howell for me is a 3-4 outside linebacker. Bain might be at the end of the end of the game. He might be a 3-4 outside linebacker. We'll see where he goes. But all I know is with the players like those, the production, top level production, on a big stage, the guys that have talent is just now you have to find a way to utilize them. And for certain defensive coordinators, certain coaches, are you going to go off of your norm, go off of what you know and what you want, and
right.
utilize a player like that? Now, the rule of thumb is if you got a dude, you got a dude, right? You put him in there and you do the best, and you win with them. So that's what coaches usually do. Just give me a football player, and I'll find a way to win with them. So to answer your question in a long-winded kind of way, if Dennis Allen's presented with a guy like a Ruben Bain, I would think, even though he hasn't fit what he wants, I think he would take him and just do the best with him. That's my guess.
Yeah, a guy that I've been falling more and more in love with through this draft process, as far as edge rushers, was Zion Young out of Missouri. We talked a lot about him on the last show as well. He may not even be there for us at 25 at this point. We were hoping he would kind of fall down to us in the second round, but he killed it in the combine and got people going back to look at his tape. A big riser for me. I liked him through the season last year. He's got a lot of production. I think 7 forced fumbles. He's got some interceptions. Was Jacob Rodriguez, the off-ball linebacker out of Texas Tech, came in and tested really well. I think he ran a 4.57 40 or something like that. Just did everything he had to do to prove that he belongs there and really helped his drafts. I was hoping he'd be a guy that would kind of fall because of his size to like the 4th round or something. We could steal him, but I don't know. What do you think of him, Danny?
Yeah, in terms of Rodriguez, talk about production. This guy had production galore on his tape. I mean, talk about a guy creating turnovers. They got a hell of a job there, right? A leader in the middle of the defense. So that's a guy you want to build around in terms of a middle linebacker. But he tested phenomenal. I mean, if he tested. This is where you got to go back and say, all right, like his numbers don't match his tape, and meaning by he doesn't look that athletic when he plays, right? Because my biggest concern with him was like, I'll know he'll be there filling the run lanes, the gaps aggressively. I know he'll be there trying to punch that ball out and creating turnovers. I know he's going to be there week in and week out because this guy's a gamer. He plays hard. But he ran a 4.57 with a 1.6 flat, split, 10-yard split. That was incredible. 30.5-inch vertical. So a 6.9 3-cone, which talks about shows most of your agility and ability to change direction. Like I didn't see that on tape with Rodriguez. So definitely his numbers don't match the tape, and that you go back and say, all right, this guy, he's been training for this, right? He's been going through speed training, speed coaches, and all that stuff. So you always kind of have to take the numbers and then go back and look at the tape, right? Even if it's reversed, even if you see a guy on tape that looks fast, but he runs a slow 40 or his explosion numbers aren't what you thought they were going to be, you got to take that with a grain of salt as well. So for me, guys that outshine what, I thought they were going to do on tape based off of their tape athletically, I kind of say, all right, he's got a good, he's got been some training. He's got a good, speed coach. And I think that's kind of helped his numbers there. I just got to go back to my tape and say, all right, this guy, even at the Senior Bowl, like coverage is where he was going to be lacking there, covering backs and maybe even tight ends out of the backfield. But that's why I kind of saw him as more of that 3-4 inside linebacker type, that could play in the middle there for those type of teams. So he definitely has a spot in the NFL. If people are talking about him, maybe a 4th round pick, he's probably in that day 2 range now, whether it's 2nd or 3rd round. We'll see where it goes. But he definitely elevated himself, I think, from a day 3 to potentially a day 2 pick now.
Absolutely. Any other guys that really stood out to you that kind of helped their draft stock a whole lot on the combine?
Well, I know not so much for me, but I know a lot of our fans, a lot of our listeners are really concerned about safety, right? That safety position, and you guys all know about me how I feel about safeties, but I mean, this was by far the most talented and most athletic safety crop that I've seen come through the combine in years, right? So, and I said it multiple times, I know the Bears don't have any safeties currently under contract, but I feel like they're gonna resign Kevin Byard. I feel like they might sign another veteran, right? I'm not saying they're gonna
free
go
agency coming up. Cliff said it right here.
Who? Oh yeah,
free agent.
For agency coming up, Cameron Crowe is a guy I like a lot. The guy from the Rams, obviously the guy who made that interception on Caleb in that Rams game. He's a guy I like a lot potentially there. Do you take a flyer and bring in Gardner Johnson again for another year, another 1 year prove it deal for him, and just kind of line him up there? Draft a guy in the 3rd round. Last week I talked about a couple of guys that I liked. Bud Clark from TCU, I love that kid, ball hawking safety. He's a guy, if he's there in the 3rd round, I'll like him. AJ Halsey from LSU is another guy who looked really, really good in those drills, and I like him a lot coming into the combine. So, and there's guys like Jalen Kilgore from South Carolina.
I saw him against Kentucky.
Amari Ramsey from USC. There's a ton of guys here that if you just go down the list, you'll just see a bunch of guys that are coming here that could play. You might get them in the 3rd, 4th round. So I think that's another good thing for the Bears there as well. A need position that's got some good quality depth, right? That you can get in day 2 or maybe even day 3. So, but that to me was really good there. And obviously the receiver group there, the speed and some of their talents there. And then obviously Jeremiah Love for me was I think he just sealed himself in the top 5. I loved him coming in. He was my top running back. And I thought, there's no way he's getting out of top 10. No, I don't think he's getting out of top 5. I mean, there's teams like Arizona at 3, Tennessee at 4, and obviously the Giants at 5. I mean, they are all now have Jeremiah Love square on their radar, so he might not get out of top 5 guys. So obviously, I think Love had a good game. And Kenyon Sadiq, not that the Bears need a tight end, but I think he came in there. He showed that he's a guy that had a productive year at Oregon, but that straight line speed, that athleticism, I think that's something that's going to propel him probably in that 20 range. 22 with the Chargers, 23 with the Eagles is probably going to be his range where he goes now. So I think he kind of solidified himself there as well. So yeah, a lot of guys did well. A lot of guys, didn't kind of live up to their tape. Carnell Tate, for me, the kid out of Ohio State, ran a 4.5, I think with 4.57, which was weird because he plays at a 4.4, 4.4 speed. But then there were some reports that some scouts had Tate at a 4.42 or 4.45. So again, it all depends on some of these hand times, right? So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, again, the safety class for me did well. The off-ball linebacker group to me was another deep position group, which again the Bears are going to need an off-ball linebacker, and I think maybe possibly in a couple of weeks from now we'll cover that group there as well, the off-ball linebackers, depending on what happens in free agency.
Yeah, we'll probably have news this week of Tremaine Edmonds, whether he is traded or outright released to give some cap relief. So we'll definitely have to fill that need, whether it's the draft or via another free agent. D. Levine's asking about Mesidor.
Remember, Edwards broke his ankle in that Packers playoff game, so we don't know when he's going to be available, right? So that's 2 starters that are down, and and then obviously Sewell, right? I think he tore his ACL late in the year as well.
It was either ACL or Achilles, but either way, neither one was.
Either way, it's a long term. So that's going to be a huge need, position that they have to fill. Whether it's, I'm assuming they'll bring in some veteran. Maybe they'll resign DeMarco Jackson. They'll bring back some of these other guys, but and then maybe bring in a veteran here or there. But definitely, off-ball linebacker will be a position of need for them as well. So front seven is glaring for the Bears right now. Front 7 players is just glaring right now in terms of needs.
Absolutely. Demario Davis is another free agent. He played for Dennis Allen in New Orleans. I don't know if he's kind of up there in age. I don't know if that's the way they want to go. I'm not sure what his speed is at right now or anything.
Him obviously, and then also Keaton Ellis, who also played for a little bit with the Saints, was with the Falcons. He's also a lot ball. I think 31 years old. He's also a guy that's very productive, getting a lot of attention from other teams as well. So those are a couple of veteran free agents. But again, with the team being over the cap right now, any move for a veteran, that's going to have to come at a bargain basement kind of deal here, unless they do something drastic where they just clear up all this cap space and then go get a big name player. Which if they do that, I don't think it's going to be an off-ball linebacker. I think it's going to be more someone up front in the defensive line.
Right. Was there anyone at the combine that hurt their draft stock this weekend by either not working out or not being to the level that you thought that they would be at? I'm
trying to take a look and see the list here of anybody that hurt themselves. Let me take a look at the defensive tackle group, because that's the group that I've been really kind of horning in on. I think defense tackle, I think pretty much a lot of them did what kind of was expected of them. I mean, for me, in terms of another guy that didn't hurt himself, but actually helped himself, it's got to be Gabe Yakis from Illinois. I mean, that's a guy that Senior Bowl week, I was hearing 3-4 outside linebacker. Comes in here at 6'4", 260, 33+ inch arm length. Now there's talk, hey, he could be a hybrid. He could be a 3-4, outside linebacker. It could be a 4-3 outside linebacker. And with the production he had at Illinois the last couple of seasons, I think he's a guy that kind of helped himself here. He probably secured himself in that second round range, I would say now. Some of the guys, I think TJ Parker, from Clemson, kind of solidified himself there in the bottom half of that first round. He's coming off that good Senior Bowl week. Came into the season as a hype prospect, had a down year at Clemson. And I think, went into the Senior Bowl, had a great week there. And I think that kind of continued here at the combine here as well. So not sure off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody that actually really hurt themselves. But a lot of guys, I think, really did help themselves here. And so we'll see how it goes.
I know you haven't been able to dig too deep into cornerback, but J2K is asking here, and I've heard of Ephesian Prysock and Takario Davis, both from Washington. I'm not sure who the other guys are that he's got listed there. Do you have any?
Austin. These are all big cornerbacks. I haven't dove into them yet, J2K, but I will be doing a deep dive in some of these cornerbacks. My favorite cornerback of all, he hasn't mentioned here, that's Chris Johnson from San Diego State.
He's a guy that's really good.
Really good. His biggest knock was speed. What does he run? Does he run a 4.5, 4.6? Because his tape is kind of off-putting there in terms of long speed, staying in phase downfield. He ran a 4.45 40. Again, another guy that for me at the Senior Bowl was right there in terms of press coverage in the face of a receiver. Those one-on-one drills, was staying in phase downfield with some of these receivers. Doesn't matter who you lined up against them. Chris Johnson to me had a great Senior Bowl week, and I think he kind of carried that over here as well at the combine. So that's a guy I like a lot. Obviously, the top guy is Mansour from LSU, but he'll be long gone by the time the Bears get at 25. So plus, at 25, if you haven't done anything on front seven, I can't go secondary until I get some of those front seven holes filled up.
Right. I love the way he ran the gauntlet as well. He looked really smooth doing that, and that's one of my favorite drills for both receivers and corners. Cliff is asking Chris Johnson. Yeah. So Cliff's asking us, what do we think of Zay Frazier? Should we be excited? We didn't get him at all last year. I don't know much about him. I know he's got the size and that they look for, the speed. What are your thoughts on Zay?
Yeah, I don't know, Cliff. Only thing I can tell you, like AC just said, he didn't play last year, had some weird, family thing going on. Talk about size, talk about a guy that showed length. The only good thing I can say is, Al Harris vouched for him. Al Harris told Ryan Poles, get this kid, and he went and got him. So that's, if that's any indication, Al Harris was a guy who recommended Nashawn Wright. Could this be his Nashawn Wright, this coming up this season? That's the hope we can all have, right? But until we see Jaw Frazier out on the field there playing football again, I know he participated in the OTAs, and then all of a sudden, right after that, there was some sort of family thing, and he was gone basically for the entire season. So that's the only thing I can go off is basically Al Harris' recommendation. If Al Harris vouches for a guy, then I'm gonna give him a shot, and that's all I can do right now.
Yeah. Well, our biggest thing today is to go over the defensive tackle position. It's a huge need. Bears fans know it. The Bears know it themselves. I think right now they have 2 defensive tackles on the roster. and those aren't even they haven't done the best. So we're going to go over today, go through our list of defensive tackles. I've got some tape on some of these guys, and I've got them in your order, Danny.
Mhm.
I believe it's the order that you had sent it to me in. Number one is Caden McDonald. He's been the favorite that everyone's looked at. Nose tackle out of Ohio State, and I'll just throw the tape on and let you talk.
Yeah, this is my top guy here. If they're stay at 25 and he's available, I think he fills a need. I know a lot of there's a lot of hit or miss in terms of what players might pick at his game or not. He's not the pass rusher that some of the other ones could be or might be. But again, this is a 1-year starter. This is a guy that kind of bid his time there at Ohio State and waited his time, and then finally this past season was his first full season. A 2025 consensus All-American, the Big Ten Conference Defensive Lineman of the Year. Again, just a 1-year starter, 14 starts under his belt, but he had 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 9 tackles for loss this past year to go along with 65 tackles. And this is the guy that you talk about first and foremost, run defense, right? This is a guy that's going to be able to stack and shed and mill that defensive line. And we know last year, the run defense was a big sore spot there for the Bears, midway through the season. Kind of got a little bit short up there towards the tail end, minus that 49ers debacle. But, this is a guy that, to me, you plug and play. Is he fully developed yet? No. But he's got a good, body in terms of 6'2", 326, 32 and a quarter inch arm length. This is a guy that's got that quickness. He's got, to me, while he's not there right now in terms of a pass rusher, he's got the potential to be that 3 technique, I believe, right? Some have already deemed him as just a one technique, just a run stuffer. I think he's got more in him. I think he's a guy that, first and foremost, coming in day one will help you run defense. Second thing is you coach him up. And you use some of that athletic ability. We just show some of his clips there. He's got that quickness. He's got a little bit twitch in his body. For 6'2", 326, that's impressive, right? And I think what he's got the potential to be someone that could give you 6, 7, 8 sacks potentially, down the road. So, is he going to be that day one? No, but day one, he's going to be a run stuffer. Day one is going to help you solidify that run defense. And then you can utilize some of the other guys to help you, in terms of generating some of that pass rush. But what he could do, besides stuffing the run, is plant his hands in the chest of an offensive lineman and walk him back into the quarterback until he develops his pass rush arsenal. So for me, Caden McDonald is my top defensive tackle, especially if the Bears stick at 25 and he's sitting there for them on run one.
Yeah, he's been a favorite of a lot of Bears fans. Like you said, run stuffing, big dude, taking care of business, and just doing what he's got to do, man. He's
potential to get better as a pass rusher. If I didn't see on his tape that he's got the ability to be a consistent pass rusher, that's all right. This guy's just a run stuffing defensive tackle. We can kind of push him down the board here. But no, he's got a potential to be a guy that can generate 6, 7 sacks for you from the defensive tackle position because of his quickness, because of his ability. When he's asked to penetrate and get into the gaps, he's shown the ability, the quickness, the first step to be able to do that. I like the way he moves laterally in terms of defending the run and then be able to kind of slip there and flash his helmet into the gap to alter that run game. So day one, he'll be a guy that helps your run defense, in my opinion. And then from there, it's up to the coaching staff to get the pass rush ability that I believe he has in him developed, and then we'll see some of that results on the football field.
Yeah, absolutely. The next guy we got here is Lee Hunter, the defensive tackle out of Texas Tech. Also played at UCF prior to Texas Tech. His tape looks really good. He looks like a big guy, a big monster, but his numbers at the combine didn't really help him that much, did it, Danny?
Well, it depends on what you're looking for, right? So this Lee Hunter, obviously, as you mentioned, this is a 3-school transfer kid, right? Started off at Auburn, was a 4-star high school recruit coming out of Alabama, where he actually played both sides, offense and defense. Chose Auburn over schools like, Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Georgia, LSU, name it. The big time schools are coming after him. He chose to go to Auburn, ends up transferring over to, UCF, where he sees most of his success there. And then he goes over to Texas Tech this past year and has, in my opinion, one of his better years. Now, He's a guy. He's a big guy, 6'3", 320. His arms came in at 34-inch arm length. So we talk about the prototype and what Dennis Allen likes, and those interior guys with some size there, right? 5'1", 840, which I don't care about. It's the 179 10-yard split, which is what I look for these big interior guys, right? So 179 10-yard split could have been better, maybe, but this is also a guy that for me is still kind of getting better, still learning. He still needs some time to develop. However, day one, I think he'll be able to come in here and kind of occupy some blockers, take up some space in the middle of the defense, again, helping somewhat fortify your run defense. And he's got that ability, that twitch. You go back to the Senior Bowl, you go back to some of these highlights we show here. He's got the ability to be that 3 technique in that 320-pound frame. Okay, so he's a guy that to me potentially could be another one of these guys that could be wreaking havoc down the line. So, I don't want to make comparisons, but similar to a guy like Chris Jones, a guy that could develop into someone like that, a guy that can rush the pass or play the run. I'm not saying he's going to kick out the defensive end like Chris Jones does, but he's a guy that athletically, I think he's got some twitch and he's got the ability to be at the upfield kind of penetrating defensive tackle that could play 1 technique or 3 technique. Worst case scenario, you got a guy that's at 6'3", 320, 325 with 34-inch arms that can help, again, block up that middle, occupy multiple blockers, and help you run defense from day one. So that's why these 2 guys for me right now, McDonald and Hunter, are my top 2 defensive tackles. And these are the only 2 guys I would take with that pick 25 if presented with these.
Man, that's I got my thoughts on that, but I'm not a scout either. Your next guy is Christian Miller out of Georgia, and here he is.
This is big. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just a big defensive tackle. You go ahead, man.
Yeah, Miller was a guy I had my eye on, beginning of the season. He was in my top 5 in terms of Schumann draft scout, my preseason top 5 defensive tackles, 6'4", 325. Again, numbers don't pop, but again, stats don't pop. But Georgia guys, typically the stats don't ever pop, right? Kirby Smart's system, he runs a scheme, he runs a system, and the guys are just tough. And they run their assignments, and usually you don't see the gaudy numbers in terms of sacks and all that stuff. But with Miller, only had 4 sacks for an entire career there. He's just a 2-year starter, right? Starting 23 of 42 games there at Georgia. But again, the size you're talking about here, right? We're talking about a guy who's got 6'4", 325 with 33-inch arms, okay? And he's a guy that's got the length. He's got the loose hips, running a lot of those stunts in front, right? You see a lot of last year where you saw, Dennis Allen get a little creative with his pass rush, have his front 4 guys run loops and stunts. He's got the loose hips to be able to come around and provide some of that pressure off the edge. Quick feet, moves well for a guy that size. Plays with good physicality in the middle of that defensive line. This is a guy that can generate movement at the defensive line, can help reset the line of scrimmage with just some of that brute strength and some of that lower power explosion that he's got. Again, I mentioned his ability in terms of being smooth on those loops and those stunts. I like the way he does in terms of, again, occupying blockers, locating the football, and going after the ball carrier. Once again, we're not talking about a guy that's going to come in here day one and set the world on fire in terms of as a pass rusher. But Dennis Allen and his staff are going to have to coach his kid up. And because of the athletic ability and because of the way he moves at that size, I think they'll find a way to get creative and allow him to generate some pressure from that interior of the defensive line. So that's why, for me, he's next in terms of my defensive tackles. He's number 3 on my list. But he's a day 2 guy for me. He's more like a 2nd, 3rd round guy for me, not a 1st round guy in my opinion.
Oh, we got the chat blowing up, man. They're looking for our next couple of guys, and we're gonna get right into them as soon as I get this off of here. The next guy is Peter Woods, the defensive tackle from Clemson. I'll just put his tape on and let you talk.
Yeah, another one that we talked about, TJ, the edge rusher, Parker. Thank you so much. I had a brain fart there, but yeah, Woods was also a guy coming into the season. He was one of my top 5 defensive tackles. And just like Parker, he didn't have that great of a year. Now, Woods comes in at 6'2", 298 with 31.25-inch arm length. That's why he, for me, drops a little bit, right? That length is not there. Now, I know, but if you're talking about a true 3 technique type, Woods fits that profile. He's got a little twitch in him. He's quick. A lot of times with Dabo Swinney and with doing Clemson, his first step was more lateral as opposed to upfield. I think if you let him go upfield and attack, I think he's a guy that could probably produce some more production in terms of sacks and all that stuff. But again, that length, the lack of length and that size, I think something that Dennis Allen might not want right away because he's got Grady Jarrett, right? And Jarrett had a lot of people compare him to Grady Jarrett mainly because they went to the same school, but Jarrett was a little bit bigger, a little bit longer in terms of arm length, and had a little bit more production there at Clemson. So, and then Jarrett went in, I think, 4th round. Don't forget, Grady Jarrett he wasn't a first round pick. So that's why for me, Peter Woods is more of a guy in the 2nd round that, teams like, I don't know, like Atlanta and teams like some of the other, like the Rams that have these undersized, fast, athletic guys that get upfield. I think that's where, you can see a Peter Woods go there. But if you look for him to come in here and take on double teams and be a run stuffer from day one, he's not gonna be able to do that. In terms of his pass rush ability, could you be able to scheme him up with loops and stunts and free him up? Sure. Is he a guy that has some of that twitch in his frame and it could be want to be those one gap upfield, pass rushers? Sure, but I haven't seen all of that at his tape at Clemson. And again, the arm length for me was an issue. Having Grady Jarrett on the roster, he's not going anywhere. They just gave him a long-term contract. To have a guy like that, at pick 25, already have a Grady Jarrett. Now, you want to get someone that's going to be an understudy to Grady Jarrett? Sure. I have a couple of guys I can give you names in the 2nd, 3rd round, maybe even a 4th round. Guys I can be a true 3 technique, and you can give him to Grady Jarrett, and he can kind of be like the role model there. But at 25 for me, that's too rich for Peter Woods. So production, arm length, and Grady Jarrett already on the roster. That's why for me, Peter Woods kind of drops. And again, I'm scouting these guys based off the Bears and the Bears' needs, and that's why. So the other 3 guys were ahead of them for me because I know day one those 3 guys will come in and help the run defense. Not sure Peter Woods would do that. He could, but I'm not sure he would come in and be able to help the run defense right away as the other 3 guys would. And then with the other 3 guys, the potential to be better pass rushers in the pros than they were in college makes it more enticing for me to go with those 3 guys.
The next guy you got is my personal favorite. He blew up the combine. Everyone's falling in love with this guy. 6'6", 327-pound Caleb Banks out of Florida. I'll just put on the tape. I know he had his injuries, but man, he looks awful good to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but again, another one of these guys that I had in my Schumann Drafts Cup top 5 preseason defensive tackles. I was expecting a lot from Caleb Banks. I think last year I thought he showed great improvement. In 2024, had 7 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. And this year just, again, fell flat. I understand he only played 3 games because of the foot injury, but also is a guy for me, it's the true boomer bust. He is the true boomer bust pick here. Boomer bust being like he could be a boom could be like he could be our next Chris Jones. Bust could be he could be a next Gervon Dexter. That's who I look at Caleb Banks. And for me right now with the Bears, with the cap space and some of the gambles they've taken in the draft, talk about Zach Pickens, talk about Gervon Dexter. They need a guy that can come in here and give me a little bit more, something more than just a boomer bust option, right? So in terms of size, he fits the criteria. He's a prototypical type I feel like Dennis Allen would want in terms of size, 6'6", 325, 35-inch arm length, run a 1.76 10-yard split, which is, again, that's what I look for. So show some of that closing burst, sometimes on closing speed. But again, played only 3 games because of a foot injury, left the combine early because of aggravated foot injury as well. So medicals for me are huge with Caleb Banks.
Yeah.
So if your medicals are clear, but doctors say, all right, he's good to go, and you're Dallas Allen, you're like, all right, he's got the size, he's got twitch. He's not a guy that, again, one of my top 5 defensive tackles coming into the season. So he's got talent. It's just a matter of, do you trust the medicals on his foot? And Dennis Allen and staff, can you get him to be more productive on a week in and week out basis? If so, I have no problem with them going with a Caleb Banks. Just for me, he's the biggest boomer bust pick right now if you go with him in the first one. So that's why I have a 2nd round grade on him. So if they can trade down and he's available in that 2nd round, that's a gamble you're probably willing to take there at that point. At 25, at least for me, I'm looking for someone that can come in and be a little bit more productive day one.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd have to go back and look at his numbers, but I don't think he had any pass breakups, which for 6'6", you would think he could get his hands up and get on.
Career. Only one. Yeah, he's played 5 years, only played 1 in his career, only 1 pass defense. He's got only 3 forced fumbles. He's got 6.5 sacks for his entire career, and 4 of them came last year. So, production, again, has been there. This past season, you kind of give him a mulligan, only played 3 games because of that foot injury. So, again, boomer bust pick, man. This is the guy that can make your draft or break your draft depending on where you take him and how high you take him.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm more of a gambler than you. I'd take him at 25. That's just me. The next guy, you love him in the second round. Uh, Chris McClellan out of Missouri. Did you give me your thoughts on him?
Yeah, let me pull up my notes on Chris McClellan. He's a kid that as I was watching Zion Young, I'm like, who is this number 7? You know, making only some of these plays here, defensive tackle, and then I put on a tape, and then I do my Zion Young report. I go back and I look at this kid, and 6'4", 313. Again, we're in a 5.0, 5.40, which I'm not worried about. It's the 1.80 10-yard split. Could that be better? That's something that I'm a little surprised. I thought it was quicker than that in terms of his closing burst. But 34-inch arm length, 11-inch hands, the 25 reps on the bench. So he's got power, he's got the length, he's got the size. Again, this is a kid that started off at Florida. Was only one start there at Florida, the Gators. Transferred to Missouri, 2-year starter there for Missouri, and this past year he really kind of took off. 6 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. 2 pass defense. You talk about a guy that could be a 1 technique or a 3 technique. I see him as a guy that could potentially be a 3 technique for you. But again, motor never stops. It could be an upfield 1 gap penetrating defensive lineman, defensive tackle that could be a pass rushing force. So obviously in the SEC, 6 sacks is not something to sneeze at. So I think Chris McClellan, especially if you're going to maybe go with a different position group in the first round, or maybe if you trade out of the first round, who knows, whatever you do in the first round, if you go edge, right, and then you can drop on maybe second round. Some had him going initially in the third round. I think he's got himself plastered in that second round range. So if you get him in the second round, hell, I know maybe some guys might get happy if we get Zion Young in the first round and his teammate McClellan in the second round. I'd be okay with that as well. So that solidifies 2 needs there from the same school, because both guys play hard. Both guys have more room to grow in terms of the pass rush. But again, both guys are going to be day one, effective in terms of helping stopping that run. And that's what the Bears need to do. You stop the run first, and then you give yourself the ability to go after the quarterback. So McClellan is a guy that, to me, is a little bit under the radar. After this combine, we'll see what happens. Senior Bowl week caught my eye. Watching Zion Young tape, he caught my eye again. And obviously, he did this week at the combine really kind of took off for me. So for me at least, he's in that second round conversation. Again, I talked about earlier, some teams at the Senior Bowl had him in the 4th round range, day 3. He might be now day 2 for a bunch of teams as well. So if you're going to jump on him, you jump on him early, I'd say. But McClellan is a kid to keep an eye on. The kid from Missouri, not only Zion Young, but you can double up and get McClellan. I think you will do very well if you're the Bears.
Yeah. And the last one I've got tape on is a guy that I like because he's just a big old dude. Darrell Jackson Jr. out of Florida State. I'll throw his tape on here if you got anything. I think he's 6'5", 315 pounds.
328, 34 and 3/4 inch arm length, 11-inch hands, huge guy. I talk about a guy that really just kind of affects, everything in the middle of the defense, swallows up running backs, as you see right there.
Right.
His thing is a 2-year starter at FSU, 24 starts. Started off his career originally at Maryland, went to Miami for a season, and then ended up at FSU for the last 2 years. So a team captain, in 2025. So he's got that leadership quality about him. But again, his positives for me are, first of all, size, very good size and length. Right now, in terms of his pass rusher, he's just a bull rusher. He's a guy that can extend his arms with 35-inch arms, press the tackle back, and walk him into the back and lap of the quarterback. Can invert the offensive lineman. When he presses, uses his length. So when he inverts the offensive lineman, he pushes them back. He helps reset the line of scrimmage, which is very key in run defense there. Can take on blocks. He can maintain his ground versus double teams, right? So he's a guy you can bring occupied blockers on, let some of those running linebackers behind him kind of flow down and get to the action, get to the ball carrier. Will pursue and chase backside. So this guy plays hard. Okay, and again, just a big, talented kid. Production in terms of sack numbers are not going to be there. But with this entire defensive, tackle group, you don't really see that much in terms of sack production with the defense, but they all have something in terms of intrigue, right? Whether it's size, it's length, it's the burst they show on tape, it's the closing speed they show on some of these. So there's things you can work with here as well. So Darrell Jackson, again, big guy, can occupy blockers. Day one will help, your run defense and probably work in a rotation there up front. And then you can have to, rely on your coaching staff to coach him up in terms of getting better as a pass rusher. But that size and know that defensive line, that can be intimidating, and I think can really help generate, some good push there in the middle. And then obviously you got the guys coming off the edge, whether it's Sweat and Booker and whoever else on the edge. Again, his sack numbers might not be high, but his presence in there, his ability to occupy blockers, and using that length we talked about earlier, right? Getting his hands up, affecting the passing windows and all that stuff. That could be something that he could affect there as well. So yeah, that size, the athletic ability, and his ability to stop the run initially, you cannot ignore. And I think he worked himself. He was at the East-West Shrine game. That's where I saw him initially, and I remembered him. And I'm like, all right. And then he got called from the East-West Shrine game. He got called up to the Senior Bowl because he was doing so well, dominating the East-West Shrine game. Called up to the Senior Bowl, went there, did well there as well. And then I think he just his stock is kind of moving up here as well. Now, whether he goes third round, I don't think he makes it to day 3. We'll see. But I think he's in that third round range right now.
Yeah, definitely. I love his size. Just a big bear of a man. Like you said, a space eater. I love it. The next guy that we've got is it's your sleeper pick here, Danny. I'm going to throw him up for you. His name's Caleb Proctor, defensive tackle out of Southeast Louisiana. I'll throw his tape on for the guys to see.
Yeah, so this is the kid that caught my eye. Again, East-West Shrine game, right? This is a guy that was unblockable during those practices. Came over to the combine here, and here you see him against LSU. All right, at that SEC competition right there, and he's wreaking havoc. Now he's a bit of a tweener. A lot of scouts I've talked to said, is he a deep 3 technique? Is he a edge? Is he a guy that you can send him up in a 2-point stance and edge? We'll see. But he came in at 6'2", 291 with 33-inch arms, so he's not the ideal fit in terms of the proportions and all that stuff. But he's got that explosive first step quickness. You see on some of these highlights, this kid is exploding out of his stance, up the field, in the gap. Again, some of these teams, LSU right here, he gets into the backfield. He's unblockable, right? 33-inch arms. He was an all-state linebacker in high school where he also played baseball. So this kid's a damn good athlete. 3-year starter for Southeastern Louisiana. He's played 36 games. Ran a 4.79 40. And I think that's where he caught eyes of some people in terms of his athletic ability. Ran a 1.68 10-yard split. And again, I harp on that for my offensive defensive linemen because that is that 10-yard distance in which predominantly that's when they're going to use. You're never going to see these guys run 40. If the defensive lineman's running 40 yards, there's a problem, right? So that 10-yard splits is what I'm looking for, right? And that 1.68, that's phenomenal. 33-inch vertical at 291 pounds, that's phenomenal. A 4.71, a 20-yard shuttle, a 9.5 broad jump. So athletically, he fits the bill. 33-inch arms. 6'2" the height's not there, but you can work with that. 291, I think you can add another 10 pounds, make him 300 pounds. And I think he could be our 3 technique for you. So, some of the guys that have been harping on Peter Woods in the first round, this is what I'm talking about. You can maybe pass on Peter Woods, pick on a different player, and then now you can get a guy like a Caleb Proctor, right? Now, initially, I would say day 3, steal. But I think he's moving up. I think if you want Caleb Proctor, you might have to get him in a late 2nd, early 3rd round. That's my opinion. I could be totally off based on that. Just from what I've heard and what I've seen, this kid's drawing a lot of interest, a lot of eyes from other teams now. Remember, the coaches now get involved in this process after the combine. They lay eyes on these prospects for the first time. And a kid like Proctor, who's athletic, who's bendy, who's got that twitch in him. I think a lot of teams are going to want this kid. And I think 3rd, 2nd round is probably his area. But again, last year, 13 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 2 forced fumbles for game. Again, measured at 291 at the combine, and again ran a 1.68 10-yard split with a 4.79 40. So athletic freak, 3 technique, defensive tackle. Are you going to need some time? Maybe, because the step up in competition, the level of competition is much greater than what you saw at Southeastern Louisiana. But again, we saw him make plays there in our highlight clip there versus LSU. That's SEC country, right? So I'm really high on them. So that's why, if I had to bypass a 3 technique potentially in the 1st round, I got this kid. I got Zane Durant, the guy we haven't talked about yet in day 2. You can keep from Penn State. Doesn't have all the measurables, But man, he's got some quickness. He's got the ability to be an upfield penetrator. He's a guy that could help you in terms of creating some of that pass rush up front. Could get hurt in the run game, could get engulfed, but he's going to have to get stronger, get in that weight room. NFL offseason training program will get him bigger and stronger. But that first step quickness, that burst for Zane Durant, day 3, if he's there at day 3. So that's why for me, I kind of broke these guys down. So first round guys for me are Caden McDaniel, Lee Hunter, right? Second round, or day 2, if you will. Second round grades for me are Peter Woods, Caleb Banks, Christian Miller, and Chris McClellan. Third round, I'm got guys like Zane Durant, Xavier Harris from Ole Miss, Darrell Jackson, Rashawn Benny, I haven't even talked about, kid from Michigan. And then now day 3, you can go into it. You can look at what flavor you want. You want a big one technique run stuffing guy in the middle of the line. You got Dominique Orange from Iowa State. You want another
big citrus.
You want another Shamar Turner kind of player, and this is a kid from Texas A&M, and I don't want to butcher his last name, but it's Tyler Onedian. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. Cameron Ball from Arkansas, another guy, day 3, that can come in here and make plays. He was also caught my eye at the Senior Bowl. Nick Barrett, South Carolina, day 3 guy. Another guy who can come in here, come my eye at the Senior Bowl. Grayson Holton, short arms, kid from Oklahoma, another guy that could fit that 3 technique. He's got a little twitch to him. Day 3 guy. We talked about Proctor already. He's probably day 2 guy now, depending on how it goes. But and DeMonte Capehart, Clemson, the guy next to Peter Woods. Not a lot of production in terms of the stats, but athletic, big guy, 6'5", almost 300 pounds, long arms. I think he's a guy that's more of a project developmental type, but he looks good in terms of his movement skills. So a guy you can probably bring in here and kind of just harness and work up and make him into a player potentially. So a lot of depth, different kinds, right? Pass rushers, run stuffers, 3 techniques, one techniques, nose tackles. Depends on what you're looking for. But there's at least, I think I went to 16, 17 names here, and there's more that I haven't even gone through yet that you can probably get in the first two days, or first 2 days for sure, and early portion of day 3 in the draft.
Just a programming note. Joe Mandel reached out to me. He was supposed to have the stream at 7:30. He pushed it back to 8. So we're going to close this thing out in the next 5 minutes. Give me one big guy, or 1 or 2 more guys, and just kind of we'll close this thing on out, Danny. If you want to give me one that you haven't talked too much about.
Another guy that I like that I haven't done yet is Bryson Eason from Tennessee. And he come out again, a Senior Bowl guy, 6'2", 323, 33 and 1/8 arm length, 10-inch hands, ran a 1.8 10-yard split. He might be just a one gap or one technique, but he's a guy that I'm looking at next. In terms of guys that I haven't talked about, or talked about McClellan. Let's see, go through my notes here real quick. Cameron Ball is a guy I like a lot. Guys, kid from Arkansas. He's a 3-year starter for the Razorbacks, 31 career starts. Chose Arkansas over schools like Arizona State, Georgia Tech, Minnesota, Duke, Boston College. Size is 6'4", 310, 33, inch arms. Ran a 1.79 10-yard split. So, and he's a guy, again, I'm not sure if he's a 3 technique or a 1 technique, but he's a guy that, for me, shows potential to be a one-gap penetrator upfield. I love the way he stacks, sheds, locates the ball, post-snap. Did wear down from what I was watching against Oklahoma State. Did, in my opinion, wore down a little bit towards the end of the game. So maybe conditioning could be an issue there for him, but that's something that they can take care of easily at the next level.
Right.
But just take on power, guy could take on double teams, hold his ground. Again, the ability to locate the ball quickly, find the ball carrier, toss aside his blocker, moves laterally, and is able to kind of just kind of hold his ground there, and all of a sudden flash into the gap, flash his helmet into the gap, and then alter the path that the running back takes. So I think that's something that he could do as well. So Cameron Ball, the kid from Arkansas, is a guy to keep an eye on. But again, for me, he's more of a day 3 guy. I think we've pretty much covered a lot of these guys here so far with in terms of Rashawn Benny, another one of the guys I had my eye on in the preseason. Again, sack numbers aren't great, but this is a kid that was a 4-star high school prospect. Played again both offense and defensive line in high school. A 13 all Big Ten selection, just a 1-year starter. And right now he's a guy that's got some quickness at the snap. He's quick to engage post snap. you see some twitch there. You see some moves there. You see a swim move, to get skinny in the gap and pressure the quarterback. He's a guy that can press offensive lineman off his frame with his 33 plus inch arm length, and then be able to locate. There's a lot of two gapping there in Michigan, right? So he's a guy that's very familiar in terms of playing the gaps, playing the run game. So I think he's a guy that can come in here day 3. Could be another guy you could potentially develop as a pass rusher. So there isn't the premier interior pass rushing defensive tackle in this class yet. Each one. These guys, like I said, mostly will give you some of that run defense stuff, and then you could potentially see some pass rush ability, and you have to coach them up as they move on in the career. But in terms of day one, these guys will come in here and help you internally in terms of as a run defender, and then you can hopefully get them to the point where now they're affecting the pass rush and the quarterback from that interior, at least collapsing the pocket. I think all the guys we talked about here, Lee Hunter, I think obviously Caden McDonald. I think even Caleb Banks, even if he's healthy, if he's good, Chris McClellan, Christian Miller. I think all these guys can collapse that pocket from the inside and kind of bring all the walls down on the quarterback from the inside, and just get them on a more consistent basis to be that guy. I think these are guys, again, you could see these potentially develop into better defensive tackles at the next level than they were currently in college.
Do any of the ages bother you? So we got some super seniors, some redshirt seniors, some guys that have been in school for quite a while. Does it make a difference at defensive tackle or no?
It doesn't make a difference. I mean, we're not talking about 30-year-olds, right? We're talking about guys that are 24, 25. A lot of these guys have a reason why they stay, whether it's injuries, whether it's transfer, whether it's a COVID year, whatever the reason was. So, second round players, they have 4-year contracts. I heard something kind of funny where they're talking about these older prospects and whether they're going to get their second contract. A GM said, "Hell, I'm worried about if I get my second contract. So I'm not worried about my second round pick second contract." Right. So a lot of these GMs, like you get these guys that can play, whether they're 24, 25, and there should be a story in terms of why they're out there that long, and then you just kind of work them, and then if they're 25, their second contract, it's a 4-year contract. If they're a second round pick, right? 29, 30, they're probably going into the prime of their careers, and you can go ahead and give them another contract extension. So, but for me, like the premier guy in the first round is Akeem Mesidor. He's going to be 25 when the season starts. He's a guy that's been a 6th-year player, was at West Virginia, had a couple of foot injuries that kind of held him back. But you put that guy's tape on, I'd want him on my edge, rushing off the edge for me. So, again, these are some of these players. As long as the guy can play, I think age right now is no longer an issue.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to close this thing out. We'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about some linebacker position. We might throw some more defensive tackles that we didn't get to touch on tonight in with there. The chat is throwing all kinds of suggestions in there for us. Like, comment, subscribe to the Ballroom Radio Network and to Shimon Draft Scout on YouTube. Hit the notification bell to tell you when we go live. We're going to take a couple of weeks off so Danny can scour the tape and find out who he wants, and we can put some things together for him. And until next time, we'll just leave everybody with a bear down.
I will be posting some video scouting reports on Shimon Draft Scout of defensive line prospects coming up starting this week. So look for those.
Fantastic. We'll share them out there. Bear down.